Oh man, reaction
Okay.
live. Yeah.
We are live. We are live at Powered by Education, and I'm here with Robert Enlow. And this is funny. We didn't talk about this, but we didn't talk about this. We should have talked about this, but. I think I first met you, and you may not even remember this, but I think we shared a car. We shared an Uber in DC after some event uh, in DC, and that's where I first met you, and absolutely was enamored. I thought this is amazing. You were a legend. I had already heard of the work of EdChoice and had done some work for State Senator Brian Kelsey in Tennessee, and so I had already heard amazing things about you. And then I got to share a car with you to some education event. I think we were going to.
We were in DC, but the Uber took us back to Virginia for some reason. I can't remember why.
Yeah, so it was so that was our first meeting. I'm surprised you remember that. That was a couple of years ago, I think. But
Yeah.
you were definitely a legend, president and CEO of EdChoice, and just an incredible organization that advocates for parents and for school choice and for families, and does incredible research. I'm just super excited you're here, and I would love for you to talk to our families about what EdChoice is and what they do, and why your work is so important to our families. I think a lot of us don't know how you are in the trenches, going to bat for us, fighting the fight, uh, behind the scenes. And so I'd love for you to tell them just what exactly EdChoice does and how you affect all of us in every state. We have Powered by Education has families, a network of families in all 50 states, and we build these coalition groups of families to help support each other and find options that fit them best. And really, EdChoice is such a complement to that because you're providing these options through your work, every day. So I'll turn it over to you. I'm super excited to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. It's great to be with you, and thank you for having me. And yes, I do remember our trip. Let's make clear about EdChoice's philosophy and then sort of EdChoice, what it means in real life. So, look, our philosophy is very simple. We believe that all families should be free to choose so that their children can have successful lives and our society can be stronger. What does that look like in real life? We were talking before we got on. My two sons are literally heading to college today, right? They're walking out my door right now. And I'm blessed that they're able to do that. But they're able to do that because I had the ability to make a choice in their education. I had the ability to have power over where they went. And as they got older, they had the ability to have power and agency over where they went. And so in a real life example of choice, one is going to Indiana University and one is going to Purdue University, the total polar opposites and so but the fact is I could make that choice. There are too many families in America who don't have that feeling of power, who don't have that feeling of agency, mostly because they can't afford it. So our organization is very simply put on this planet to stop that, to allow all families to have the freedom to choose. How do we do that? We do that in three ways, right? So you got to understand the research and what the data says. Why are parents choosing? How can we get them better choices? What do we know about the choices when they make those choices? So that's fantastic. So you got to understand what a parent does. So in our home state of Indiana, here's a great example. A parent who chooses a voucher program, and we'll go over that in a second, tells us in our surveys that they're 60% more likely to communicate with their teacher in their new school than their old school. That they're actually getting involved in the community more than they did in their previous school. So the ability to make a choice and have a choice is giving them agency, not only in their child's life, but in the community. The second thing we do is training and outreach. You can't solve a problem unless you help people understand it and then get them educated about it. And the third thing we get involved with is you got to change state policy. And so when we started in 1996, there were 5 school voucher and tax credit programs in the country. Now I believe there are over 60 operating in 30 states and DC. They're now over 500,000 families that are choosing. and have the freedom to choose a private school using their own resources plus public resources. And so in places like Tennessee, there's an education savings account for kids who have special needs, which you know all about, right? And the key thing to remember is there's 3 or 4 different ways to get choice. I can pay for it myself. I can get a voucher from the government, which is a subsidy to go to a private school or a charter school. I can get an education savings account, which is basically money put on a card where I can customize it for my kids. Or there's what they call a tax credit scholarship. So there's all these ways to get money to a family who needs it to make choices. And so that's what we do at EdChoice. We research, we train, and we advocate.
That's amazing. You mentioned a couple of different options, and we talked to somebody this week about the educational savings accounts. And one thing that we've had some questions about from our families is what is the tax credit scholarship? How does that work? And is that that's not available in every state? How would families access that?
So that's available in 17 states around the country, and you can go to www.edchoice. I can't believe I said that. You go to edchoice.org and find it out. It's called the ABCs of School Choice, and you can get on there and see where every state is that has a tax credit scholarship program. Let's be clear on what they are. These programs allow individuals and corporations to claim a tax credit off their state taxes for voluntary contributions that they make to a nonprofit organization that gives out scholarships to private schools for kids. And so it's a 3-step process, right? The state gives a credit, the donor gives the money, and the organization gives out a scholarship. That exists, and the biggest one is in Florida, where over 100,000 kids are getting a tax credit scholarship to go to private schools.
That's incredible. Is there a one way that you think works best? You've looked at all these different options. You've looked at all the different ways to afford choice. Is there one state that you think is just absolutely rocking it, that you think is a model for school choice? Do you feel like there's one ideal way, tax credit or vouchers or ESAs that works best?
Now, you might imagine I would say that one size doesn't fit all. And frankly, one model doesn't fit all. So the state of Florida has a tax credit model, and it is rocking it out of the park, right? They have both tax credits and education savings accounts, and they're doing a great job. The state of Indiana, my home state, has an incredibly amazing environment of options. It has incredible charter schools. It has a voucher program. It has a tax credit scholarship program. It has one of the most robust public-to-public transfer programs. So over almost 60,000 kids in the state of Indiana can go from public school to public school free of charge. It's the largest choice program in the state. And so a state like Indiana has a really good competitive environment. A state like Florida has really good tax credits. A state like Arizona also down in the west, it has an incredible mix of high quality charters, and it has a tax credit program. It has an education savings account program for special needs. And so every state is different. But very few states have the kind of robust choice that Arizona, Florida, and Indiana have. Tennessee has some choice, and it's getting there. Kentucky has just started charter schools for the first year. So we've got to remember, we got a long way to go to give families true power.
You're exactly right. There's tons of work to be done. And that kind of brings me to my next question. Powered by Education does not do any advocacy work. We only train and equip families to access the option that best fits their family. But EdChoice does tons of great advocacy work. How would parents get involved in advocacy work, and what would you suggest they would do to have a voice in their state?
It's a great question. The first thing they should do is every state has ostensibly like mini-me's, right? So there's lots of groups that are in states that are working to advocate on behalf of school choice. We know most of them and work with most of them. There's a place in there's groups in Tennessee. The Beacon Center is one of them, right? Uh, there's a place in Kentucky called Bluegrass, but also Parents for Educational Freedom. There's Parents for Educational Freedom North Carolina. There's the Palmetto Institute and my SC Education in South Carolina. All these groups are out there in states that we work with. You certainly can come to our website or certainly call us and we can connect you. You know, that's just the mechanics of getting involved. The key thing is once you're involved as a parent, is tell your story, help lawmakers and help the public understand that making choices is not a bad thing. Making choices is a good thing. It's something we do all the time. And whether you go to a public school or a charter school or private school, it doesn't matter, that all choices matter. And so tell your story to those groups so that they can put you or help you get as a parent in front of the right people. The second thing I could say as a parent, host coffee clutches, do whatever you can to get this message out, right? Because your voice, there are very few things that legislators and policymakers care about. One of them is the voice of their constituents. And so it is probably the most powerful thing on a Sunday afternoon when they're in the grocery store. If you're saying, hey, I heard about this choice program, I think it's pretty cool. That's going to rock their world in many ways.
I think that's absolutely true. It's kind of a double whammy when you have a parent that speaks to a legislator and is their constituent. That makes a big difference. And when you have a student tell their story, that can't be denied. That's their story, their testimony. So I think we absolutely need to do more telling our story and reaching out in positive ways to our legislators. And
it should not be a fight to talk about options. And the more you share your stories, the more it's more genuine. Look, I can come into a state and it's great. I can be an expert, but they know me. They know what they're going to get from me, and much like they know what they're going to get from the union folks that go out and testify. What they need is real live people in real live districts saying, "All this is okay with me because I want what's best for my kid."
You're exactly right. It is absolutely, and even when things are kind of in a lull or a state of peace, it very much helps to start building those relationships with your legislators and reaching out and having those conversations, so that it isn't a constant, it isn't a constant battle and a constant fight. Are there states right now that you're concerned about, that you have concerns that there's it is a struggle or there's nothing happening there?
So I continue to wonder why the state of Texas can't figure out school choice. It's got some charter schools, which is great, but I continue to wonder why that great state can't figure out allowing parents the freedom to choose private schools. I continually worry about states like Massachusetts, where they only allow limited choice as well. I mean, this concept that we should limit the types of schools that families have, and even frankly think about schooling as a building instead of a process, right? And so part of the states that I have worried about are the East Coast states and Texas. Texas really gets me.
You're stuck with Texas. Okay, so yeah. Are they and what? So what does EdChoice do in a state like Texas? What can EdChoice do to move the ball forward and make a difference and in Texas? And what would you like to see happen there?
So we've hired someone to work the state for us. She's great. Her name is Randon Steinhauser, and we're now basically hosting community events all over the state. And so again, for us, the thing that has to happen is you got to build a groundswell of support over time by educating people about the issues. And so we're doing that in the state of Texas. And once you get the word out, then things change when people start making action at their local level. When they start making their voices heard, it does change things. And so what we have been doing is getting out on the ground in Texas and making sure people's voices get heard.
That's amazing. What I've been just blown away, and we definitely need to connect some of our Texas families to with your boots on the ground, just to kind of be able to mobilize and tell our school choice stories in Texas. We definitely, we are putting links to the EdChoice website in the comments below, and we'll definitely work on connecting some people in Texas and other states where we can kind of partner to be some of the voices for choice in the states where it's needed. Tell me about some of the research that I've been blown away by. The research EdChoice does and how extensive that is. And tell us about some of the research that you're doing now and how that affects the school choice movement.
Well, thanks. That's a great. Here's a perfect example of research put in action. Again, I started to use my own home state, but it's something we just did in Indiana. Between 2010 and 2017, I'm going to ask a quick pop quiz here. How many new students do you think net new students were in public schools in the state of Indiana in 2010 to 17? Net number.
The net number of new
students.
Oh gosh, terrible putting me on the spot. I have no idea. I'm so
96.
96.
Now tell me the net number of new staff during the same period. 10,096.
There was 96?
96 new students, 10,096 new staff. So one of the things we're starting to ask, and our research is beginning to show, is how are schools spending money, and are they spending them effectively? Between 1950 and 2009, enrollment in public schools went up 100%. Non-teaching hiring was 709% during the same period. Right. And teacher hiring was only 248%. So when you look at it, we're not hiring teachers, we're hiring a bunch of non-teaching staff. And so there's a real question here about how we're empowering our teachers. And so we've been doing these studies all across the country to ask where we're spending our money in our schools. That's one group bits of research we're doing. Another bit of research we're doing is in Arizona and other places, we want to know where the deserts are, where the choice deserts are, where are the lack of options for families. And so we've been undertaking this mapping project that allows us to find where the good schools are and where the good schools aren't, and where places are in the states that need more options, right? Because you and I both know the charter school movement will come along and they'll say, oh, look, let's put some charter school in an urban area. Well, that's great, except it may already have a lot of high quality options. But there's no high quality options near Gatlinburg, for example, right, in Tennessee or something like that. And so we've got to think through about where we're putting stuff. And so that's another bit of research that we do. And then that I think actually has real action. People see the ability to change based on it. And then one of the pieces of research we're doing is how are families, we want to know how families are behaving differently. When they're choosing, what are they doing? So we, in Florida, we just completed a study. There are 100,000 families in Florida who are in the choice program. We got a survey back from 40,000 of them. And so we're able to tell you what their behaviors are and how they're acting and what they're doing, how satisfied they are with the program. So we can then help people understand this isn't hurting families. These are the families, and this is what their behaviors are. This is how much homework they're doing with their kids every day. So it's a really cool piece of research.
Okay, what I like about some of the things that the research is, it's not just research for research's sake. This is actionable research. One of the interesting things you just said was that looking for those school choice deserts where there is such a large focus on school choice in urban areas, but what we found we started in Tennessee, and what we found initially in Tennessee was how much rural areas there are, and how there's a lack of options, a lack of choice in all these rural areas. So when you do this research, then where does that go to? State lawmakers, state educators?
So we're going to do the one in Indiana. We're going to send it to both state policymakers, but also every one of those charter school and choice advocates need to see it. And I'll tell you why. They're going to try and pump a ton more money into urban Indianapolis. Great, except that's not where the deserts are. So if you're going to actually want to help kids, and you're going to have to go to a rural strategy, and that's a very different strategy from an urban strategy, right? So one of the challenges in the ed reform movement is we all think one size fits all. But it's a solution. Hey, charter schools in urban areas, that's the best solution for everyone. Or hey, accountability, that's the best solution for everyone. And so we don't actually approach this like you would any other problem in the universe, which is how do I segment it? How do I take it apart? And how do I solve it? And instead of just sort of saying every place should do what we're doing, we got to go and say, what does that place actually need? And so we're going to take this to policymakers and say, if you're going to spend another $200 million in education in Indiana next year, why don't you set some aside for rural areas?
This is super exciting, and I think this is not something that's not being talked about a lot, and is going to be immensely beneficial to those outside those urban areas, because that's not the only school choice issue. One of the other things you talked about was research on these numbers you just quoted are staggering. This top heavy hiring and expenditures not on the student but on administration, that is staggering. I mean, and do you think that school competition, a free market where a parent can choose whatever option, do you think that encourages schools to become lean and more agile and spend money where it's on students where it's most effective? Do you feel like that helps kind of even that out?
So the first thing I want to do from this research is basically say to policymakers and public, if you really want to help our teachers, we should start talking about how we're spending money in education, right? Because I care about teachers. They matter a lot to our children, tons to our children, right? If I had two choices and I could try and fix the world, it would be choice and teacher reform, right? Because those are the two things that I think have a huge impact. So I want to know what districts are doing and making decisions about their teachers. So why is it in America we've seen money go up for kids, but teacher salaries go down? That seems to be a problem to me, right? So that's number one. I think number two, the question I'd say is we know that the way the system is set up, let's just run a thought experiment here for a second. If the average cost in America for a child is $12,000, right? And you have a classroom, I know you're going to say it's not that much, but let's call it a classroom of 30. Right, let me get my calculator out here real quick, because I'm no good at this anymore. But 12,000 times 30, I'm sure some of your listeners would know this better than I do. This is where I need a calculator. I should have done this before in my head, right? So 12,000 times 30, $360,000, simple number, right? Now, how much does the average teacher cost? According to the NEA, it's about $50,000. Let's call it $60,000 with benefits. Right? So now you've got, let's say, a classroom, 1,000 square feet. Let's call it $20 a square foot. So that's another 20,000. So now you're at $80,000 for the classroom of 30 with a teacher. Let's say a teacher's aides in there. So you got another 30. So that's 110,000, right? So let's throw another, let's say 110. Let's call it another, I don't know, $50,000 to $160,000, right? For that classroom with all the people, the lights, and everything. Where's the other $200,000 going? I just want to know, and I think we have a real question to ask ourselves. And so I think one of the reasons we're doing this research is to shed a light on this sort of really what we would call wasteful spending.
Okay, I'm telling you, these numbers are staggering. I just can't figure out why there hasn't been some sort of audit on this already. Do you know why is EdChoice leading the way in discussing these numbers?
Because how many school districts do you have in Tennessee?
Oh gosh.
We have 292 in Indiana. There are 292 problems on this issue. right? So everyone wants to blame the state, but in fact, it's districts who are making these decisions. And so, because the state gives all the money to the district, and then the district makes all the hiring and firing and all the personnel decisions, you actually have a hard time getting that data. We've been able to get to the data at the district level, and that's where it's caused a lot of consternation in some of our areas where we had superintendents saying, we're losing money, we're not able to pay teachers. And we were able to say, well, okay, so then why did you hire 30% more non-teachers last year than teachers?
Exactly. Okay, you said two things. It's school choice and it's teacher reform. Tell me what teacher reform is and what your prescription would be.
God, if I knew that, I would make a lot of money. I think there's lots of things to talk about in teacher reform. One, look, the pipeline into the classroom is really not strong enough, right? And you hear all this. Well, it's like Finland. We pay a ton of money. That'd be great. I'm happy to pay as much money as we need, so long as we professionalize the process to become a teacher. And so, teacher colleges need significant reform. I think pipelines into teaching needs to change, right? So I always used to say, well, I couldn't go back to teaching because I'd have no pipeline in, right? So how do you get more teachers who are wanting to teach, or more people who are wanting to teach? How do you pay them more and reform their education from the schools of education? And then how do you create alternative licensing? So I always used to joke, President Obama couldn't teach in a K-12 school, nor could Milton Friedman. Now, the only reason is because they're not licensed, right? Because somehow a license determines quality. And so we have to have these conversations about licensure, teacher education, teacher pipeline, and then I would call teacher pay, and then ultimately, how do you assess teacher quality? Now, to me, I'm much less of a test person. I think the testing is important, but I believe that teachers should pass competency exams. I mean, I always say this: you don't let the pilot fly just because he says he likes to fly. He actually knows how to fly. Now, I don't even know if you need an exam, a certificate for that, but you definitely need to know how to fly and have some verification of that, right? And that education is not the same thing, but we do need to find ways to get new people into the system.
Well, I mean, your analogy works. You're responsible for these students, and you're responsible for them the majority of their day, in the majority of their life. So why wouldn't you be highly qualified? It made me think about when way back when I started college. You were in there with your advisor and all these other students, and I remember the advisor pushing people through the education department, saying it's the easiest degree to get. Just, you don't have to take a foreign language, you don't have to take a higher math. Just go into education and you can teach. And I thought that's a terrible. Yeah, I fell for it. I went into teaching, so I don't like.
Look, I think the motivation of people is they want to help kids in many ways. Let's just take that motivation as it is. That doesn't mean that we want them to not be good at their job, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the real question: is how do we ensure that we have people who feel they do their job are better at their job, right? And
what do you suggest about, you mentioned a certification to teach, and that could be prohibitive to getting good teachers if it's not certification or licensure. What do you
master teaching apprentice ideas? So hey, I've been working in the classroom for the last 2 years, and this person who is a master teacher has designated that I'm capable and ready to teach. That's what we used to do. We used to do apprenticeships a lot, right? You could certainly do it that way, right? People vouching for each other, vouching for peers. That's one way. There are ways to do this, right, is the answer, than the traditional licensure system.
I think that's amazing. I think this is super exciting. And I know we're up against the time. Is there anything that this has been incredibly informative and super exciting, this research. How can how can our families get a hold of your research, and what would you tell them once they get a hold of it? Is there anything that they should do with it that would help further the cause in their state?
So again, I appreciate that. The first thing, just go to edchoice.org, and there's a research tab, and you can look at it all. And each of the pieces of research will have a summary, and then some of you have slideshows. So you can just actually go look through the slides. Here's a simple thing that they can do is download their piece of research, and your parents at your organization, or the National Alliance Public School Options with my friends out there, you guys, let's see, how many other parent groups are there in the state? So pick one, right? There's lots of them, and go share it, and take that data and go share it, and then have them share it. It's really a word of mouth sharing thing, and I think that's the most important thing families and parents can do.
You're so right. In Tennessee, there's when we were facing opposition to ESAs or vouchers, it most of the negative reactions are based in fear. Like, what if this happens? What if and it's nice to share some of this actual research that supports there's no disastrous outcomes when parents have choice. There's there's no, and so you're right. That is spreading that and kind of helping to reduce the anxiety and fears when you offer choice is such a big help.
And if you do it as a parent, genuine, I always make, and this dates me, right? I always use the quote, it's from Ghostbusters. It's not like cats and dogs are raining from heaven, right? This is all safe. Everything is okay. The world's not coming to an end, right? So.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. That is the kind of fear. When we were just talking through in Tennessee, there was some community forum on ESAs, this ESA bill that passed, and there was actually weeping. I mean, there was people crying about how this might destroy the fabric of their schools if we offered parents an option. And I just look around, and it shouldn't cause that much distress. And I think your research speaks to
shows that. I appreciate you saying. I'm sorry, this gets on my pet peeve, so I apologize. You know what I do know? I know that 27% of the country can name the three branches of government. I know what's destroying our kids' education right now. We know the outcomes of what we've got right now. So I appreciate people want to defend their individual schools, but I am not okay with 27%. I am not okay with only 3 out of 100 African-American boys being able to make it out of college. I'm not okay with these things, right? And it's our current system and our current schools that have allowed that to happen. Now, there are a lot of great public schools. That's not what I'm saying. But those schools are out there. I just don't want them to be the ones that are not performing well, right? So we know what one size fits all has gotten us. So, again, those who say the world's going to come in because a parent offers a choice, I challenge you to take their choice away and see how they'd react to that.
Oh my gosh, we are leaving it at that. That is the word. Robert, you're gold. I've just enjoyed, you have been a legend in my mind. I got to, share an Uber with you, and now, this great conversation. You're just amazing. Thanks for all of your hard work, and I hope we continue our conversation and see how we can continue to work together.
Would love that. Thanks for having me, and thanks for all you guys do.
Thank you, Robert. Robert Enlow with EdChoice. Go to edchoice.org for all the research and incredible advocacy work. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.